Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Tuesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. I'm Paul Dottino. He's Matt Citak. We'll be here for the next hour to talk New York Giants football and other things NFC East or NFL with you. Our number is 201-939-4513. Again, a lot of people don't use Twitter, but if you want to, you can go to #GiantsChat. We'll try to pick up some of your questions and comments there if that's the way you prefer to communicate. And as always, if you're not listening to us live, our entire Giants podcast network is available on podcast platforms everywhere, as well as giants.com/podcast. Now, yesterday, you'll recall, Matt and I were on the program, and we did a lot of reviewing of the Super Bowl of the world champion Philadelphia Eagles, what they did against the Kansas City Chiefs, what the future looks like for the Eagles. They've got a lot of players under contract. They've got a team that, at this point, looks like it's clicking on all cylinders. We know Kellen Moore is now headed to the New Orleans Saints to become their new head coach. So they do have to replace their offensive coordinator. That's the one change in the coaching staff that could provide a bit of a dent in their armor, because I think, Matt, we both agreed the changeover in the coaching staff before the 2024 season turned out to be a tremendous advantage for them.
Yeah, I don't think they win the Super Bowl without Kellen Moore as the offensive play caller and Vic Fangio as the defensive play caller. I mean, both of them had just a tremendous impact on the Eagles throughout the season, and especially in that run to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. So what we did a lot of during yesterday's show, folks, just to catch you up, we talked a lot about the Philadelphia Eagles, and if they're the litmus test for a championship caliber team and they're in the Giants division of the NFC East, we kind of looked at, well, what is their situation? How could that morph in the next couple of years? And what do you have to do to get into their league and to challenge them? Specifically, how would the Giants try to match up in certain areas of strengths and weaknesses with Philadelphia? Well, today's program, I think we're going to look at the other two teams in the division, Dallas and Washington. Now, why do I say that? Matt Okada, and I apologize if I pronounced your name wrong, Matt, on NFL.com, has a story today, analysis, 6 NFL teams to be hit hardest by free agency in the 2025 season. Now, why do I mention this? I mention it because he mentions the 6 teams. One of them is in the NFC East. That would be the number 3 team on his list, the Dallas Cowboys. And his honorable mention team, which falls just outside the top 6, basically team number 7, he lists them as honorable mention, along with the New Orleans Saints, as a tie, the Washington Commanders. So his future, or forecast, I should say, not future, but his future projection for the 2025 division is maybe a little bit rosier than we may have thought. Now, Philadelphia, we told you, they're in really good shape. We think outside of a couple of maybe high priority free agents, they may not have a ton of work to do. But according to this item, Dallas and Washington are in significant trouble in terms of dealing with their free agency.
Agree and disagree.
Well,
I agree on the Cowboys.
Cowboys have a bad cap. They got a cap number that's a real big problem.
That's why I agree on the Cowboys and have to disagree with the Commanders, because the Cowboys, according to Over the Cap, the Cowboys currently are almost $3 million over the cap already.
Yes.
So they are, going to have to do some restructuring, make some moves just to get under. And then, obviously they're going to want to add some talent as well. Well, they're going to have to move a lot of money around in order to make that happen. The Commanders, on the other hand, while they are set to have a lot of players about to hit free agency, that's because last year when Adam Peters took over as GM, they filled out a lot of their roster with short-term deals, 1-year deals. So the Commanders, according to Over the Cap, are going into free agency with around $78 million in cap space, which is the 3rd highest amount. So the
Commanders, is what the article mentions.
Yeah, so the Commanders are going to have plenty of cap space to make moves, to add pieces. They obviously found their quarterback of the future in Jaden Daniels, build the team, at least the offense, build it around him. So they're going to have a lot of cap space to make the necessary moves to potentially take them to the next level. The Cowboys, on the other hand, they're going to have to do so much maneuvering to get under the cap and to give themselves space to make any sort of significant move. They are definitely in trouble when it comes to their cap space.
Oh, they're sucking quicksand right now.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. That's why he puts them at number 3, and he's got the Commanders with the Saints, again, tied right outside the top 6. He says here the Commanders have an absurd 28 unrestricted free agents heading into March, which is a ridiculous number. He mentions significant contributors, Bobby Wagner, Jeremy Chin, Benjamin St. Just, Igno Bahene, who is a very difficult name. I'm sure the Washington announcers would be thrilled to get rid of him. Dante Fowler Jr., Zach Ertz, and he says essentially every receiver outside of Terry McLaurin is apparently free as well. In his words, it will be extremely tough to bring the whole band back. However, they do have the rookie quarterback contract. They've got $78.1 million in cap space, third most in the league. He says now, and this is where the tricky part comes in because you have to make decisions. He says, even if the team looks much different in 2025, it should be just as competitive, if not better, with the right off-season moves. So maybe the better phrasing of this is that those two teams have an awful lot of work to be done. Dallas to get out of the quicksand, Washington just to try to find how they're going to keep their heads above water, because that's a lot of players to make a decision about before you even talk about importing other guys.
Yeah.
A lot of work's got to be done. And the
true.
more moves you make, also the more chances that you can make a mistake.
That is true. But, I mean, clearly still overall, Commanders are in a very good place considering they're just coming off a 12-win season, having won only 4 games the year before. And, we're one of the worst teams in the league and made it all the way to the NFC Championship. And clearly the moves that Adam Peters, in collaboration with Dan Quinn made last year, they worked. Almost all of them panned out. So, unfortunately for the Giants, I feel like, maybe Adam Peters won't hit as big of a home run of an offseason as he did last year. But he is a very, smart and intelligent general manager. I'm pretty confident in saying he will be able to use that large amount of cap space to fill out the roster, fill the holes that they currently have, and, put the Commanders in a better place, a better position going into this upcoming season than they were going into this last season.
Yeah, as I'm looking here, the receivers we're talking about, McLaurin and McCaffrey are signed, but Noah Brown, Diami Brown, Zacchaeus, all unrestricted.
That's why, we've spoken a little bit about how already we're a month post the regular season ending, and we've already heard rumors about, or not even rumors, legitimate reports that Deebo Samuel's going to get traded, Cooper Kupp's going to get traded.
Yeah.
Who else knows? But whenever, a reporter talks about those players, almost every single time you see the Commanders mentioned as a possible destination, because when you have that rookie quarterback and you have Terry McLaurin on one side, putting a talented wide receiver on the other side of the field is got to be one of the top priorities for the Commanders. I mean, if T. Higgins somehow makes it to free agency, which we don't know if he will with the Bengals, because the Bengals clearly want to keep him.
Oh, that'd be a great place for him.
If he somehow hits the free agency, I would be pretty confident in saying Commanders will be right up there offering him the most amount of money, or among the best offers he's going to get, because they need another receiver. As you just mentioned, they literally only have 2 receivers under contract for next year. And when you have your franchise quarterback going into year 2 of his rookie deal, and especially coming off a NFC Championship run, you build around the quarterback and give him as many weapons and as good of a protection up front as you possibly can.
Well, the other receiver they have under contract, of course, is their 3rd-round pick from this past season, Luke McCaffrey, who didn't put up necessarily big numbers, but even coming out of the draft, there were people who thought he had to make it grade. He's not a nobody.
No, by no means.
Now, how much of a jump will he take if they put a big piece of responsibility on his shoulders? Who knows? Nobody knows the answer to that. But I think you're right. If they can get themselves a big-name wide receiver, which is going to cost them, but they've got the room.
Yep.
A big-name wide receiver to pair with McLaurin. Why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be priority number one for the Commanders this offseason.
And T. Higgins would certainly fit the bill. Man,
I certainly hope he does not end up there.
I don't want to see him there.
No.
I'm going to tell you that right
Terry
now.
McLaurin, that is a scary 1-2 punch.
Yeah, do not want to see him there. And then McCaffrey could just slide in as the number 3 guy, and that's a pretty good situation for him. And then on defense, Allen and Payne are still there. We know because they signed their big deals earlier. Yep. So they're fine. There's nothing going to happen to those 2 guys.
And they have Newton right behind him as well.
Yeah. Now, Bobby Wagner is so long in the tooth, but this guy just keeps going and going and going. I don't know what to make of it because he's a heck of a player. Obviously, it's a Hall of Fame.
How many consecutive All-Pro selections does he have?
Is it up to 10 now?
I think so.
The guy's he's unbelievable. One of the few guys who kind of fits into that category. Remember London Fletcher?
Of course.
Who also seemed to play for like 565 years before he finally retired.
Yep.
And it seemed like he was productive every year, even at the end.
Yeah.
What do you got for
Wagner's 11 consecutive either first or second team All-Pro selections. 11 straight.
Insane.
He had his first 2 seasons in the NFL, and then since then has been an All-Pro every single year. Crazy.
Unbelievable. What was his tackle total this year? You have it up?
I can pull it up.
It's insane.
This year he had 132 total tackles. And that was coming off of 2023 where he had 183 tackles. Led the NFL.
Look,
nuts.
Dan Quinn knew that when he got to Washington, I'm bringing my lieutenant from the days of Seattle with me.
The quarterback of the defense right there.
I
would not be surprised if they make a strong effort to try to bring him back because of how big of an impact he had.
And he is how old? Did you punt it? How old is he?
He's 33 now.
Oh, no.
34.
See,
but he's turning 35 at the end of June.
You would think he's 55 because he's been around forever.
No, but the way he's playing, he plays like he's 25.
I know. So anyway, I'm sure that they're going to find a way to bring him back.
Yeah,
I'm sure
certainly
about
going to
that.
try.
Interesting, though, that Jeremy Chin, who really kind of elevated his game, because remember, with Carolina, he was injury prone and never lived up to his potential. When he came out in the draft, he was really regarded as a very highly sought-after prospects. And yet with injuries, it just never worked out for him. So he gets to Washington. He had himself a nice year.
Yeah, he really did. 117 tackles, tied for his career high, started every single game, which I think is the most important thing because, as you mentioned, the 2 seasons prior to that, he played in 12 games in 2023 and 11 games in 2022 and missed the rest because of injury. So the fact that he was able to stay on the field for all 17 games and have a big impact in the secondary, they kind of used him all over the place.
Yeah, really. But that's why he got a 1-year deal because he was hurt so much.
He had the 1-year prove-it deal, and
now
he proved it.
It's time to pay the piper.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a little more difficult.
Yeah,
to try to bring him back.
He's still young.
Yes.
I'm assuming he's going to have a lot of suitors in free agency.
Correct. So anyway, those are just a couple of thoughts and tidbits on the Commanders. I'll tell you what, too. And you guys know that, Zach Ertz used to roast the Giants all those years when he was in Philadelphia. Then he went to Arizona and kind of got lost in no man's land. And then he went back to the NFC East with Washington, and he proved out to be a pretty clutch target for Jaden Daniels this year.
Yeah, I mean,
he had a really good year.
He had the reunion with Cliff Kingsbury, who was his coach in Arizona.
But he didn't do much there for him.
No.
He wasn't that big of a factor.
He had some, didn't he have some, solid seasons? Maybe not all pro seasons.
Yeah,
but
he wasn't as much of a factor. He was a little bit kind of lost in that shuffle.
He was also dealing with injuries the whole time he was in Arizona.
And quite
never
frankly,
played more than 11 games in a season with Arizona.
He's also getting up there in age.
Oh, yeah. He is, how old is he now? He's 34 as well. Turns 35 during this upcoming season. So
it ought to be interesting to see what they do with him because John Bates, their backup, is also an unrestricted free agent. They got to go back now to Ben Sinnott, who I liked an awful lot coming out of the draft. Last year, he was a second-round pick. Now, Sinnott is not your typical tight end. Sinnott is a do-everything guy. He's an H-back. He's an inline guy. He can go to the slot. He can play a little straight fullback. He's one of those versatile do-everything tight ends. And for that reason, I liked him coming out of the draft. I don't think he can be the threat that Ertz became for Washington this year in terms of the passing game in clutch situations. I don't think Sinnett's that guy. I think he's a valuable, versatile NFL player, but I don't think you can count on him to make the kind of plays that Ertz has made.
No, if I'm Washington, I'm not going into the 2025 season
Making him my starter
with that expectation.
Yeah, you can't.
He could eventually get to that level, but he's going to need a little bit more time to develop. I do think there's a solid chance that Zach Ertz is brought back because of the success he just had, because he's getting up there in age and he has that familiarity with Cliff Kingsbury. I could also see the Commanders easily targeting a tight end on day 2 of the draft because there are going to be some good tight ends that go on day 2. If they could add a tight end on day 2 and get a top wide receiver, whether it's T. Higgins in free agency or one of those other guys, Cooper Kupp or Deebo Samuel in a trade, that offense is going to be scary this upcoming season. That is just playmakers all over the field.
I agree.
With Jaden Daniels leading the group.
Now, they're going to have to hope, though, that their offensive line holds up.
That is their weakness on offense, for sure. The offensive line, I would say, if there is a weakness to the Commanders, it's their offensive line. And I think Jaden Daniels' just mobility and his ability to escape pressure masked some of the, maybe not so great performances from the O-line. So even though according to this, they have all their starters set to return.
Yes.
I would not be surprised if at the very least they use some draft capital.
They have to.
Some early on draft capital to get some depth on the offensive line and guys that could potentially take over for some of those, mediocre returning starters.
It turned out to be a functional line. And I think going into the season, we all thought it would not even be as functional as it was. So they're not going to whistle past the graveyard. They're going to get reinforcements this year.
For sure.
There's no doubt about that. All right, so I think we probably agree. I don't think Dante Fowler's going to make it back, but I think you're right with Wagner. I think you're right with Ertz. Wouldn't surprise me if Diami Brown makes it back there either. I don't think he's going to cost them a fortune.
Probably not. I can't imagine.
Even though he's still on the young side. But I'm not sure of how many of their other key guys, probably half of their key guys, may wind up making it back. So we'll see. And obviously, how much is that going to cost to bring those guys back will then eat into the money you're talking about. And then if they go out and they sign somebody like A.T. Higgins, premier receivers could easily cost you $20 million.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just looking at Pro Football Focus has contract projections, so obviously we have no idea if these will end up being accurate. But for Bobby Wagner, at least, they project because of his age, a 1-year, $5 million deal. If that's what he ends up signing,
that's a bargain.
I'm fairly confident in saying it will be with Washington. I don't know if Zach Ertz, they have projected as 1 year, $3.5 million with $2.5 million guaranteed. Again, if he's signing for that, I would think there's a solid chance he ends up back in Washington.
All right, we're going to go to a couple of our phone callers since we have people on the line. And then after that, if we get a little slow time, we'll look into some of the Dallas problems because they've got problems.
Yeah.
That's not even a matter of, okay, what do they pick? What do they choose? Pick left or pick right? No. They've got flat out problems that they need to get out from under. The door to the closet's locked and it's dark in there, and they got to find their way out of the closet. All right, here we go. 201-939-4513 here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. We go to the phones, and line one is Cliff in New York. You're first on the program today.
Hey, guys.
Hi, Cliff.
How you doing? Good to be with you. Thinking about the number 3 pick, I was reading the cover 3 on the website today and reading about these offensive linemen highly rated and as projected for us in the second round. And I'm thinking, why not in the first round? I know you're not supposed to do that unless it's the guy that came out for Indianapolis a few years ago, the guard.
Quentin Nelson.
Yeah, but look, there's a couple of guys that are listed there that are multiple position guys, both inside and outside, and I'm thinking about the success of the Eagles over the years with the offensive line, and we know that they not only always drafted offensive linemen, they always drafted them in the first few rounds. I don't know if they took them in the first round. I think they did at least once. The unsung hero in the Eagles' success this year is still Andy Reid, in my opinion. He left such a mark there that even long after he left, his draftees were still playing, including this year. He just must have made a heck of an impression on Howie Roseman about how to go about things and make sure that you got the trenches taken care of. So I'm thinking that we'd have to be incredibly lucky if this guy Carter is still available when it gets to the third pick. And I'm not keen on the cornerback if he wants to also play wide receiver.
Wait a second, Cliff. You were just going offensive line, and now you're talking about Abdul Carter. He's an edge rusher.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying if he's available, I would take him. But I'm assuming that the guys that are considered the two best picks in the draft, I don't think we can count on being there at 3, and that's where I'm going for an offensive lineman. And then I'm thinking that in the second round, with so many defensive tackles to choose from, we could still be doing very well there.
I don't know that there's anybody who believes that an offensive lineman is worth a top 5 pick in this draft. Just FYI. I mean, even Kelvin Banks is not a top 5 pick.
I've seen Will Campbell in a lot of mock drafts projected as a top 5 pick, but that's more so because teams like New England,
they're desperate,
have Drake May and are just beyond desperate for offensive line help. But even in those mock drafts, they mentioned the possibility of, if the first 3 picks play out like this, New England could be a prime trade back team, a couple of picks, and then still get, Will Campbell of LSU or Kelvin Banks from Texas.
Yeah.
Even Cynthia Freeland of NFL Network, who's like their analytics expert, in her first mock draft, she has the Giants taking Cam Ward at 3, but mentions that in several of her simulations of the first round, she has the Giants trading back and then taking Kelvin Banks when they trade back a couple of picks further into the top 10 to fortify the offensive line. So I do think offensive line is a possibility, but I would be shocked if it is at number 3. If the Giants decide to take, an offer where they're getting a first-round pick and more in next year's draft to fall further into the top 10, then I could easily see one of those offensive tackles being a target. But at 3, it's a little too rich.
Yeah, Banks and Campbell could definitely be between 5 and 10. I don't think that's out of the question at all. But I don't think they're in the top 5.
Okay, well, I like expanding it to 10 because what I'm also really thinking is trading down from 3. If the corner and the edge rusher go 1 and 2, then we get a call from Las Vegas or even the Jets, and then get down at least to their spot.
Well, I'm on board with that, Cliff. I've been talking about trading from 3 to 6 with the Raiders for a long time.
If we can go from 3 to 6, pick up the Raiders' first-round pick in 2026, and then somehow still land, someone like Mason Graham from Michigan, that is my 100% ideal dream scenario for the Giants. Because as we just saw with the Eagles winning the Super Bowl, having a fortified front on both sides of the ball, that does wonders for your offense and your defense. And Mason Graham next to Dexter Lawrence would be, without a doubt, the top interior defensive line combination in the NFL, and it wouldn't even be frankly close. And then you'd have 2 first-round picks, potentially high first-round picks in the 2026 draft, where the quarterback class is supposed to be a little bit stronger.
Cliff, I'm telling you right now, if Hunter and Carter are 1 and 2, and I'm up at number 3, and I can't make a trade out, I'm taking Mason Graham at 3. I love that kid that much.
Okay.
I think he's that damn good. Any team that passes on Mason Graham, they better be 150% sure of the guy they're taking, because Mason Graham is going to be an impact defensive tackle in this league for a lot of years. I'm telling you that right now. Just know that. He is going to be dynamite. So you better be sure if you decide to pass on him and leave him on your board, because that's going to be a painful leave on my board if I had to do it.
Yeah, I was down with that until I heard Schmelk was backing off that a little bit. He's not sure he's that elite a talent. he'd love to have him, but wasn't elite enough for 3. But it wouldn't make me unhappy. That's interesting what you just said, Matt, though. It's not just that we're adding a DL or 2 or 3. We're adding 1 to Dexter. And that's an interesting idea to me. Maybe there's a multiplier effect there. That when you have somebody as good as Dexter is, and you add somebody to him, it's more than just adding a guy next to him.
It's not just that, Cliff. It's also what you're doing for Bobby Okereke. You put 2 stud defensive tackles on the field at the same time like that. Your middle linebacker is going to drool because of the double teams and the amount of traffic that those guys are going to take up and clear his path to the ball carrier. Oh, it has more than just one implication.
Yeah, I mean, you add Mason Graham, your front 4 is now Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, Mason Graham, and Kayvon Thibodeau. Like, at least one of those guys is going to have to get double teamed. You're not going to have all 4 of them with just one guy trying to pass block every time the opposing quarterback drops back, which means Bobby Okereke, or anytime you send a blitz, chances are they're going to have an open lane right to the quarterback.
That's why it's hard for me to pass on Graham, but I would have to if Hunter was there. I just think Hunter is too generational of a talent. I'd have to pick him over Graham. But I'm still a huge Mason Graham fan.
You're not worried about Hunter playing receiver also?
I would have him play maybe 10 snaps a game as receiver. He'd have a small package for me, probably when I went to 4 wides in selected instances. He'd be in a sub package, but he would primarily be a corner for me. I want him out there locking down people. I think he's that good.
And that doesn't take away from his training as a corner because he's as good as he is?
If I'm going to give him just one small sub package, why?
He's still time away from being a corner.
Yeah, but you know what, Cliff? Compared to what he's done now, that's like not even a homework assignment. Because right now, he's busting his butt on both sides of the ball. Okay? Now if I tell you, guess what? You're going to pare back your wide receiver stuff. We're going to give you just 8 pages of plays. Here's a small sub package you're going to be part of when we go 4 wides. Are you kidding me? That's going to be like a vacation for him.
Well, I'm not so concerned about what he thinks. I'm concerned with how well he does on the field as a rookie cornerback. I just think it's a full-time job that you need full-time training for. Let me ask you something else about the corner thing, and another reason I'd pass on him. But I really am not nearly as in tune as you are with him as how good he might be. But I'm intrigued by if we shore up the front 4 like we're sure we're going to do something, that's got to help the defensive backfield. It always does. And how much do you think we can really maybe get a big boost from that coaching change back there? Because they figured it out as a communication problem, and that's so huge in the play of the defensive back. They always teach us, right? Can we get a big boost upward from? Because it seemed like when things went bad in the secondary last year, those horrible plays, it just seemed like guys were looking at each other like, "Where were you?" and "Where were you?" That kind of stuff.
Well, there was much too much of that in the latter stages of the season. Cliff will let you go. Nobody knows. When there's a change in staff, you have no idea how the players are going to mesh with the new voices. You just don't.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Like, could there be a big boost? Sure. There could also not be. Like that, we won't really know until we actually see the players on, the practice field, I'd say, first with spring workouts and then in training camp when they're actually getting coached by, these new coaches, then we'll kind of start to see the potential impact that the coach might have.
You also need, as Shane Bowen eloquently put it at the end of the year, he now knows more about the players and the guys who are here, his staff members too, although there's been some changes there. So he's going to tweak things too. I mean,
yep.
Anybody who thinks that the Giants scheme is going to be exactly what it was last year, I think is kidding themselves because they do self-scout. That's what the offseason's about. The coaches need to figure out how they can make their scheme better as well. So I'm going to assume that Shane Bowen's going to make adjustments.
Yeah, for sure.
I think he's got to. We go to Len from Maryland. You're next on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Hello.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Hi.
Hey, Len.
A couple of questions off topic based upon what you guys have been talking about here for the last 3 or 4 minutes. Paul, I want to clarify for me.
Yeah.
You would take Graham if Hunter and Carter are gone.
Yes.
You would take Graham at 3, not a quarterback.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Huge Mason Graham fan. If you watched any of Michigan this year, you see how disruptive he is. I would first see how much I could get for the pick. Because if there is somebody who wants to go up to number 3 and get one of those quarterbacks, and they're willing to give me a first and a second rounder in the future, I would absolutely make that trade because that's a very nice haul of draft capital, which then, of course, gives me the opportunity next year to use those extra picks and move up if I've got to go get a quarterback. I'm giving myself a safety valve there.
Yeah.
That's why I'm doing that first. I'm seeing if I can get my haul. If I can't get my haul, I'm taking Mason Graham. That's how highly I think of him as a player. Now, Len, remember something. I'm also of the opinion that the Giants are going to take care of their quarterback situation in free agency and or the trade market. I fully believe, and every day that goes by, I believe more and more and more and more, the Giants are going to make a splash in either the trade market or free agency for a quarterback, and that's going to be the guy who's going to start for at least the next 2 years, and that's why I'd be willing to take a QB in like the second round or even the third round and let that guy sit for a couple of years and be a future developmental guy. And then if I have to take a swing at another one in another year or two, fine. I'm okay with that. I'm just not high enough on the 2 quarterbacks at the top of this draft to make that move, if it's me.
Okay. Matt, let me talk to you about a comment you just made related to Graham.
Mm-hmm.
I know you like him, obviously.
I like him a lot, yeah.
Tell me, what do you call that defense that you articulated for us with Graham and Big Dexter? And you want the 2 linebackers? You want their hand in the ground, Matt? What do you describe this to me?
He's trying to trap you because he knows I don't like that.
Is it a 4-3 defense?
He's trapping you. He's trapping you.
I mean, look, if the any way you put it, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, and whoever's starting next to Dexter, they're going to be on the field most plays. I don't care as much about, whether or not all 4 of them have their hands in the ground or not, but I want my best players on the field as much as possible.
Okay.
And so, I would love the fit of Mason Graham next to Dexter Lawrence. The hypothetical situation you gave to Paul, where if Carter and Travis Hunter are the first 2 picks, as much as I love Mason Graham, I would not take him at 3 there. I would I would take Cam Ward because I really like Cam Ward. But if the Giants are in a situation where they could trade down a couple of picks, let's say to the Raiders, because that seems to be a popular, potential trade down possibility. Okay. Mason Graham would be my dream pick at 6 while picking up that extra draft capital.
Well, do you think? Well, let me go there for a second. So you're hoping Graham is there if you make that trade?
If the Giants were to trade down from 3 to 6, then
I know you want the pick next year, but who do you hope is there at 6?
Mason Graham. That would be my ideal dream pick. Would be to move from 3 to 6 and Mason Graham be the pick. Bird in the hand, you'll take a chance at 2 in the bush, huh? I guess with the future draft pick and whoever. I mean, if the Giants were to do that trade, let's say from 3 to 6, and pick up at the very least the first round pick in 2026, they're doing the trade obviously for that extra draft capital in 2026. Who drops to them at 6? Obviously, they would have no idea who will actually be there because the third pick would be a quarterback most likely. But at New England at 4 and the Jaguars at 5, who knows who could go? So I'm not doing that pick saying I need Mason Graham at 6.
All right. That's I mean, that's a legitimate point of view. It's hard to argue with that. I don't go in that direction. And let me just tell you what I would do, and then move on to just a couple of other things if you have time for me. I would hold the pick, and I'd pick a quarterback at 3. If they're not there, I'd go Carter. I'm holding that pick.
We're assuming in the scenario land that Hunter and Carter are gone, though. Hunter and Carter are gone, 1 and 2. You can't pick Carter at 3.
No, I'm saying if the quarterbacks go 1-2, I'm picking Carter.
Oh yeah, well
there's nothing wrong with that.
That's a totally different.
That's a different argument.
Than what you brought up, though.
I know.
I'm picking Hunter, but Carter's a good pick too.
If quarterbacks go 1 and 2, I agree with you. I'm taking Abdul Carter.
First round picks. If I'm the owner, I'm telling the general manager, don't come to me trading the 3rd pick in this draft, or whatever first round pick we're going to have in 26, or whatever first round pick we have in 27. That's where you get your starts. You get them in the first round. If you don't believe that 3 is better than 6, Mac, in terms of getting a star, then we might as well do away with the draft. We might as well do away with the draft. So I'm holding those first round picks. All right. Yeah. But listen, I understand where both you guys come from. You got time for a couple more?
Real quick, one more, Len, real fast.
Okay. Your discussion. I got intrigued by your discussion yesterday, Paul, about I think it was Julian who called up, was talking about worst teams and so forth. I mean, this was a pretty bad team.
It wasn't. He didn't ask worst teams, Len.
The worst, I think.
He asked what was the most difficult or the most miserable season that you had experienced, and there can be different reasons why a season was miserable.
Yeah. Now, given the popularity of the sport, the coverage of the sport, etc., the Barkley situation, the Jones situation, it's easy to come down on this year being the most disappointing. You only went back to around 1970, Paul. Let me take you back a little further, and I think you.
Well, I know where you're going to go.
Well, I'm sorry.
I know where you're going to go. Yeah, because the late 60s, the late 60s gave you 19. Yes, Gary Ward at quarterback, right?
Yeah. Oh my God! And then you remember we went to L.A. without a quarterback. Everybody was hurt. And we picked up Tom
Gary Wood. I said Ward.
From
Gary
the
Wood.
minor
I'm sorry.
league Brooklyn Dodgers and took them to
I
California.
know.
And I think the Rams laid 55 points on us, if I remember correctly. But all you need to do is look at the point differential in 66, and you can figure out.
I know. But see, Len, I was
60,
a toddler. I don't remember the 66 season. I'm sorry, I just don't. I can't go back that far. Okay, but I'm aware of it.
All right. Well, check it. You get a chance someday.
Oh, I know.
Free time.
I know.
Check out 66 and just look at the difference in scoring.
It was brutal.
Matt,
I understand.
I know your family goes way back. I'm sure somebody will tell you about 66.
My grandpa.
And one other real quick. One of the most disappointing to me, because I think it was the worst trade the Giants ever made, was 1964. Coming off the 3 losses.
Yes, in the championship
especially
game.
The one in 63. I frankly thought we were better than the Bears and we're going to win that game. And YA got hurt. It didn't work out.
Well, they went after his knee.
Yeah.
They took him out.
Yeah.
They took his knee out, and that changed the whole game.
Yeah. But then trading off YA getting hurt.
I know.
Sherman taking over, Ali for thinking he could redo that team in 1 year, and oh man, we made a little bit of a comeback in 65, and you know what? We made, and maybe this relates to what we've just been through this year. We made a little bit of a comeback in 67, Paul. We traded for Tarkenton.
Yep.
And after that miserable 66. Well, I just wanted to add those two, and a quick shout out to Kafka. You guys had him mic'd up at the Senior Bowl.
Yes.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I'd play for that guy.
It's good stuff.
I'd play for that guy.
Thank you, Len. We got to run.
Put me in.
Okay. Be good.
Thanks, Len.
201-939-4513. I get it. Everybody wants to talk about the 5,075 hypotheticals involving the 3rd pick in this draft. I totally get that. The problem is, folks, that there is a huge, and when I say huge with a capital H, I mean it, free agency period and trading period that is coming a month before the draft. This Giants team is going to look different in a couple of significant spots long before that draft board goes up and they get the phone call from the NFL that says, you're on the clock to make a pick. Trust me, things are going to brew here over the course of the next month. I feel very confident in saying that. And if you don't believe me, believe what Eli Manning told all the media at the Super Bowl. He said flat out, the Giants need a veteran quarterback to lead them this year. Something's going to happen before the draft that is going to give you a very clear map about kind of how they want to prioritize their draft. So a lot of this talk about this third overall pick right now is really kind of pointless because the circumstances are going to change.
Yeah, look, right now we're a month away from free agency. There have been no trades yet because the Super Bowl literally just happened 2 days ago. So right now, it's fair game to talk about all of the very different wide-ranging scenarios that could play out come April 24th. But as you and I talked about on a show, I don't know, sometime last month, a couple of weeks ago, that how the Giants address the quarterback position before the draft should be a pretty big sign on what direction they might go in the draft. Now, it's not certain, if they go out and trade for a well-known, established veteran quarterback, that doesn't necessarily mean that they won't still take a quarterback in the first round, because they could. Right. We just saw the Falcons sign Kirk Cousins to a crazy deal and then draft Michael Penix. So it's certainly possible. But, we spent a whole episode talking about this. If they go out and sign a significant quarterback free agent or someone that's making a lot of money or trade for someone, that definitely changes, I would say, the percentages of the likelihood of whether or not they go quarterback at 3.
That's why it's important to look at the contents of that contract.
Yeah.
That's what's going to be really key. Not just the name that they bring in, but what does that contract look like? What is their commitment? Yep. Remember, the Daniel Jones contract had the escape hatch that after 2 years, they can digest a nasty cap hit, but at least they had an escape hatch.
And let's not forget that only 1 year into that deal, last year, Giants made a very strong effort to try to trade up to take a quarterback. They were just unable to. So they tried, though. And so that Daniel Jones large contract did not hinder them from trying to trade up and take a quarterback anyway.
So, the contract details will give you some hints. It won't be an absolute, but it will give you some hints as to what they're thinking over the course of the next 2 or 3 years. Back to the phones. Hakeem from North Carolina is next on the program. Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Hi.
Good. How you doing?
I'm a first-time caller, but
thank you.
Giants fan. Yes, sir. I want to say trade for Matthew Stafford. Definitely. Depends on how much it will be. I know if we trade for him, that it will be around like $27 million on the cap, and I'll definitely take that. But I don't see the worst scenario that I want is we're at pick 3 and both quarterbacks are on the board. Because if we choose the wrong one and end up like the Panthers, we just gonna keep on being a laughing stock. So I think we should get the veteran of Matthew Stafford, or we just keep on playing quarterback roulette and just build a team around the quarterback so any quarterback can come in and play, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Akeem, whatever they decide in March, I'm telling you, that's to me is the guy who's going to start week 1 in 2025. I'm sure that's what's going to happen. I really do. And how long do they plan to go with that guy? Again, look at the contract details. You're mentioning a player who at this moment is on another team and is rumored to be in the process of a potential renegotiation. And depending upon how that works out, he may or may not become available to the rest of the league. And that's all we can say about him. But if you're interested in acquiring such a player, well, that kind of player, someone who is not too old, you would think a player of that ilk is going to have some time left. He's not necessarily looking to be a one-year bridge.
Yeah, it would be, I would say, a couple of years. I don't know if you would want to necessarily rely on someone that age for more than necessarily maybe 2 or 3 years.
He's certainly not a one-year bridge.
I don't think so. But on the flip side,
if you get someone of that ilk, and again, we're being very generic here because we have to be.
In this hypothetical situation, this player did, I believe wasn't it just last year where there were some rumblings about him contemplating retirement? I believe that happened sometime.
Well, there were rumblings about
Stafford
being on the trade block. I don't remember retirement talk.
I thought he was part of the
Possibly.
whole,
I don't remember.
Stafford, McVay, Aaron Donald, all of them contemplating retirement. I thought that happened, last year, or maybe even 2 off seasons ago. So I would say I wouldn't, again, in this hypothetical situation, don't know necessarily I would want to rely more than, maybe 2 years. If you get more, that would be great. But just given his age, I don't know if I'd necessarily want to count on that. But one thing I will say is I hear Akeem, what you're saying about if both quarterbacks are on the board, it could be somewhat, nightmare fuel for fans because you don't want to choose the wrong one. And I hear you. I get where you're coming from. I will say that I feel like the people in this building would probably disagree strongly because come April 24th, chances are they're going to have one guy higher than the other on their draft board, and they very much would like the choice of which one of the two they would want to take. So,
unless, of course, they're not all in on either one of them.
Which is entirely possible.
It's absolutely possible.
It is possible. So I'll just say this. If the Giants decide that they want to take a quarterback in this draft and have both of them pretty high up on their draft board, they would want their choice of the two. I don't think they would want another team making that choice for them.
About Shedeur, I don't want to put words in you guys' mouth, but I could have sworn someone said that he was too small or smaller than Cam Ward. But every video I see and every time I look at him, he's over Cam Ward. So I don't think Shedeur is small. If anyone said that, I feel like Shedeur is just as good as Cam Ward, by the way. So I would be okay with
the number I see is
Justin,
6'2", 215.
Just in terms of size, it seems like Cam Ward is listed 1 inch taller, but it's not the height, I think, that is why people say he's smaller. Cam Ward is just thick. He's a compact quarterback, while Shedeur is, I'm not saying he's, a stick, but he's definitely more on the leaner side. He's got some muscle to him. He's not a small guy by any means, but Cam Ward definitely has, at least he's listed as 25 pounds heavier and 1 inch taller. So he's definitely got a little more, compactness to him than Shedeur does.
And if you watched him play, it's obvious.
And I got one last question, and I'll let you guys go. I'll take it off the air. If we do or if we don't get Matthew Stafford, would you prefer him or Godwin? And I imagine if Kupp gets cut, I imagine he'll be cheaper. And I know Godwin is seeking a bigger contract. But between those two guys, I know they're veterans. So which one would you guys take? And I appreciate y'all. Thank you.
Thanks for the call.
Thanks, Akeem.
I think any team that has Matthew Stafford on it, whether or not he stays with the Rams or lands somewhere else, I think the natural attraction to Cooper Kupp is going to be something that they're going to consider.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is all very recent that this Matthew Stafford trade speculation has kind of started, but I mean, I've seen some speculation that the two of them could get traded somewhere together, that it could be sort of like a package deal because Cooper Kupp, he seems like he's not going to be playing on his current contract next year.
Yeah,
There's going to have to be some sort of restructuring.
More than likely, they won't get a deal for Kupp. Teams are not going to give them a trade, and they're going to be forced to probably make him a cap casualty, and he'll be set free. And more likely, at least that's the way I see it.
Yeah, I mean, I would not be shocked in the slightest bit if that happens.
Yeah.
But between Chris Godwin, who is set to hit free agency, and Cooper Kupp, who might hit free agency, Cooper Kupp's obviously a little bit older than Chris Godwin, but Chris Godwin is coming off a serious injury, one that cost him over half of the season.
What?
Both of them kind of play more predominantly in the slot, which the Giants do have Wan'Dale Robinson. Now, that shouldn't prohibit them from potentially, at least looking into these guys, but it is somewhat of a overlap there in the slot, I would say.
I mean, there are some names in the free agency list, but now we also know the 49ers have said Deebo Samuel's now on the block.
Yeah, and
so there's a lot of guys.
Deebo, I would put in this sort of same category as these two guys.
Yeah.
T. Higgins is in his own category.
Yes.
He is a number one receiver.
He's a different style.
These other three, at this point of their careers, don't seem like they can be counted on to be that number one receiver for an entire season between injury concerns, age. But if I had to choose between these two, if money was not, in the equation,
it's always a factor.
If they were to cost the same, which I know they're not going to, Chris Godwin is going to get more money.
No, they will not.
But if they were to cost the same, I would say I would prefer Chris Godwin. But again, Chris Godwin is 100% going to get more money on the free agent market. Even if Cooper Kupp does get released by the Rams and hits the open market, at this point of his career, he's not going to get the sort of monster big deal that Chris Godwin's going to get.
No.
Chris Godwin, according to PFF, projected to get 3 years, $60 million. So $20 million a year with $40 million guaranteed.
And
Cooper
that's a
Kupp,
premier price. $20 million is a premier price.
Yes, for sure. Cooper Kupp, if he hits free agency, getting a fraction of that at this point.
No doubt.
So,
no doubt. All right, so back to the Dallas Cowboys, unless maybe we get to sneak one more call in. They're talking about how signing Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb to contract extensions puts them in a terrible predicament. Also trying to figure out for an extension for Micah Parsons. They talk about here DeMarcus Lawrence, Eric Kendricks, Jordan Lewis, Odiki Zua, all scheduled to hit free agency this spring. And they are significant pieces of their defense. Okay, significant. That's their core. As well as Zach Martin, of course, who may be contemplating retirement.
Yep.
All right. Now, if he doesn't, he's going to cost them some money.
Yeah.
And if he retires, they got to replace him.
Yes.
So that's not good. Either way, that's not good.
Correct.
Okay.
Although at this point, I don't think he's going to command too much money in free agency. Obviously not like he would have a couple of years ago if he hit the open market. PFF has him projected 1 year, $7 million.
No kidding.
Yeah.
A team looking at...
Again, he's 34 years old. But a lot of the guards...
Offensive linemen tend to last until their upper 30s.
That is true. I was about to say a lot of the top interior linemen that are about to hit free agency, a good number of them are, in that mid-30s.
A team
age
looking
range.
to enhance their offensive line depth might want to just take a ponder in his direction. Anyway, don't say a word. The item also mentions the fact that they need a running back desperately.
Oh, yeah.
And there are running backs in the draft. It's the second best position next to defensive tackle.
Yep.
And then also talks about Brendan Cook's list on the list of impending departures. So that's what we're talking about for the Cowboys, and they are almost $3 million in the hole as it stands right now.
That's why we said they're in trouble.
Big trouble. They need more like 3 Mack trucks to throw them a line into the quicksand just to try to get their head out of the quicksand.
I feel like the easiest way for them to, well, not the easiest way, but a possible route they could take to get out of the hole a little bit and to replenish, at the very least, some pretty high draft capital would be to contemplate trading Micah Parsons. But on the flip side, if you trade Micah Parsons, you're losing not only your best player, but one of the best players in the entire NFL, who is, how old is he, 25?
I was going to say maybe 26.
He was in the 2021 draft, so he's going into his 5th season now. Obviously, very young, because he came out of school after 3 years as well. You don't want to trade your best player, obviously. He would garner, at this point, 2 first-round picks, probably, if they were to contemplate trading him? Because he's one of the best players in the league. So that's like, you're in a catch-22. Do you do the move that will set you up potentially for the next couple of years in the draft to build this team, but then you'd sort of be signaling a rebuild? And how do you do that after just signing Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb to massive extensions in the last year? So they are definitely in an interesting situation.
Dak Prescott's contract number on the cap this year is $90 million.
Yeah, pretty confident in saying they're going to be able to, they're going to rework that.
They'll redo it.
There's no way they can.
But here's the problem, okay? He's on the books for 67.7 next year, 61.7 the year after that, and in 2028, 79.7. That's already based on his current deal. To get his number down this year, they've got to push more money into those years and the years after that.
Yeah, they're going to have to do what
this is really bad.
They're going to with that contract in particular, they're going to have to do what we've seen Howie Roseman do with many Eagles contracts, which is add void years and push some of that.
He's already got 4 void years.
No, but if you look at the actual cap number, there's only 1 year.
Yeah,
of money
because
with a void year.
he's got that much voids on the back.
But then why would the cap number still say 0?
I do not know.
What I just said.
We're looking at over the cap, by the way.
Yeah, that is assuming that he does not already have multiple void years at the end of his contract. If he does, then it seems like that is how they will be able to restructure stuff and push money down the road. Where Dak, 5 years from now, Dak might not be on the team anymore, but they still could be having a pretty significant cap hit.
Oh, it's a Bobby Bonilla deal, like with the Mets. You're going to pay this guy
exactly.
forever.
When you push it down the road, you're kicking the can down the road. Eventually, you do have to pay. But
now,
that would be one scenario where they could sort of get out of the red pretty easily.
It's funny. Over the cap has a $71.7 million cap hit for him in 2028. And then his first void year is 2029. And the cap number only comes down to 1.4. I don't know what the Spot Rack has, which is another contract website.
They say that he has 4 void years, but they don't have cap hits. So maybe it's just not known how much cap hits in those void years are.
I don't know enough about contracts to be able to get into the weeds of these things.
They also could have just set it up where they set it up with these void years for the inevitable restructures to push money down the road.
Yeah. Either way, there's going to be a chunk of cap room on this guy's deal for many years to come. That's just a fact. There's no way to get around it.
100%. That's what happens when you sign your franchise quarterback to a monster deal.
And when you overpay. 201-939-4513 is our phone number. That's going to wrap up today's program here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Once again, Pearson, I invite you to chime in with an update on the Giants huddle. Not only what we have up there today, but what is coming up the rest of the week.
Rest of the week, right now we have draft season up there, and I believe we'll have a her playbook in the next couple days as well.
All right, draft season, of course, with the master, Tony Pauline. Love listening to Tony.
I thought you were about to say John Schmelk.
Yeah, but John's one of our guys. Tony's the guest. Tony's the guest.
I'm surprised you're calling John the master.
No. Tony's the guest. He's the master.
No, of course.
Tony is so plugged into the NFL. All right, I think he walks around with like 5 different headsets on his head. Every time I see him at the combine, he's listening to somebody. He's always a fun guy to talk to, and he's a great addition to the draft season programming, which has been now in its 3rd year, I think.
I believe so.
Yeah, so anyway, that'll do it for this edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. We will be back again tomorrow. Once again, we are here every weekday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time for a 1-hour live program. And if you'd like to catch us on the archive, it's available on all of your favorite podcast platforms everywhere and at giants.com/podcasts. For Matt Citak, I'm Paul Dottino, and we will see you next time on Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. So long, everybody.